one of the signs that the self is absent, the traumatized self, is one can see beauty and is in awe of it. So I was feeling some pain in my body, and I decided to go out for a walk, and then I looked down from the cliff, and the water, it looks so magical. I just want to get in. It's pretty cold though, and I feel like I could just stay here all day and watch the water flow. It's so changing and new. And then I was watching these barnacles. I've never seen the big barnacles that have these big things sticking out. They look really ancient, and they're combing the sea. So I took some video of this beautiful spot. Maybe I will try and get in the ocean one day when it's not windy. Maybe the cold will be good for my body. Try that. I'm laying kind of upside down on a rock. Water's back there. Feels good. The beauty is immense. And we're all friends. I wrote down something before I went out for a walk. I wrote down that the answer isn't in detaching from those one is attached to, but in loving everyone as much as one would if one did unconditionally love those one was attached to through life circumstances. I don't know if that's true. There are no words. Why is it that sometimes one could watch the ocean for hours with not a single thought, and then other times one cannot stand another single second of this existence because of the pain of the self, of continuance, of trauma. Of noise. There's an infinite beauty, an infinite stillness that one is able to tap into sometimes. But one of the keys is that we need to forget. We can't wish for these moments, as beautiful as they are, to continue, because that is the movement of accumulation, and it's the movement of accumulation of memory, which is painful. I wonder if the manifestation of a mood disorder is the trouble with switching from operating in a quantum-based possibility way to operating in a Newtonian way, and having to shift between the two and not knowing how to communicate that. The ocean is so smooth right now. So beautiful. And the word beauty does not sum up all of this. It's a way to communicate, but this is not the word. I've taken some notes down lately that I could talk about, but I've lost my process of being able to talk about insights since I really haven't had my own space. But I think I might want to try to carve out that space again at some point, because I've been talking a little bit on a group online and people are making comments that I'm channeling, I'm speaking for millions of people, they want to make notes on what I'm saying. What I'm saying is genius. I'm channeling some kind of wisdom. So I have all these videos that I haven't shared, but in this group I'm sort of sharing like I would on a video. And the feedback is good. Not that it's not the intention of that group to have feedback on what I'm saying, but people are giving me good feedback. So it's a sign that maybe it would be helpful to people. But I'm still in the process of trying to figure this out, trying to figure out how to contain these states of fear and anger that they want to be acted out, and they want to cause trauma and perpetuate trauma and cause chaos. Because it's really intense. And it's not congruent with the moment. So if I'm here on the beach and I have this intense pain and anguish psychologically, that is not congruent with standing on a beach. So it's not something only from this moment now. Because if it was, then one would be feeling beautiful and beautifully, because this is pure beauty. So something in the body isn't congruent with the moment now. And that's the thing, is that I don't think we're linear entities. I don't think we're consistent or anything like that. So I was thinking about how the DSM, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, is the manual for those who cannot be consistent linear personalities. And nobody is. People are able to be consistent in their work environment, be consistent in their public life, but at home they could be eating tons of ice cream or crying or whatever. So even the people that are maybe not labeled in the DSM, they could be if they showed their discontinuity in public. And I think that's part of the trouble, is that when we get diagnosed, people are aware of our discontinuity, and it makes them uncomfortable, because then they don't know how to deal with us. So in the process of getting to know each other, we try to figure each other out, so then we're comfortable. We know how to act around that person, who they are, their characteristics, and then we can sort of plot out appropriate strategies to be. Whereas if somebody is labeled bipolar, they're really inconsistent, another person has to be really open and fluid to be able to respond to that person. But since people aren't comfortable doing that, they'd rather call that person bipolar and then medicate them when they're not acting as they're known to be. And who is the biggest storehouse of knowing how that person is supposed to be, how they were, is often the family. This is not how they were, and now they're different, so they must be ill. Well, no, they're different. We can change, and we think that we're supposed to have this personality, but we don't have a personality. How we manifest is dependent on the situation and how we're situated and the energies we're picking up on. And we're picking up on the wholeness of the situation. So we might bring into attention characteristics in the field, but we manifest that as human behavior, and we're not sure how to communicate that. We're not sure how to communicate the more that we see. And if we did communicate it, people would wonder how we knew that, because it's not something from our memory, but it's something from direct perception. But that's not how people operate. People operate based on theory of mind and guessing what's going on in the mind of the other. And with bipolar, you can't guess what's going on in their mind, because they've entered often into a state of consciousness where they are the whole total mind. And so they are operating based on that a lot of the time. But then we ourselves get into a trap in that we think that it is attributed to a self, some of these more magical qualities, but it's not. So building of a self with that energy is a mistake. And one of the ways to not build a self is to forget everything, because it's memory. It's the accumulation of memory that builds a self. So it's important to forget. I think that's going to be one of the next great things, is the art of forgetting. And yeah, I wrote a lot of other stuff down to talk about, but I do feel like a lot of it is repetition to what I've already said in many different ways. But it could be valuable to open up the dialogue again, because dialogue is valuable, the process of dialogue, the brain being in dialogue. And my videos more recently have been dialogue about the self, the personal self, and that could be a distraction. And I think it's a necessary phase to know how to deal with the personal self and its manifestations. But I've had thoughts again of going out and sort of wandering and being an agent of synchronicity. Because if one doesn't do that, then one synchronizes with the traumatic field and sort of acts out of that traumatic energy as a way to possibly communicate that there's something wrong in general with the structure of how we relate. But then we get pathologized because we don't know how to communicate that. When the trouble is, this type of thing, like synchronicity, isn't verbal. It's mostly nonverbal. So something of synchronicity would be like leaving something somewhere for someone else to find. And knowing that one is profoundly changing the course of humanity through doing that anonymously or what have you. Someone here told me an interesting story. They said that they really wanted green tea, and then there was green tea in a room, and then that person asked the other person, how did that green tea get there? And they said, oh, it was on this cart. And so they brought it into the office. So that person manifested green tea, and the green tea was in German, and this person is German. So they manifested German green tea probably like the day they wanted it, even though it was on its way before this person knew that they wanted this green tea. So what we need is on our way to us in a non-linear, magical way. Like the linear way would be, I need to order that online, or I need to go out and get it. But someone put that there and didn't really know why. There's no reason why. So moving beyond causality, there's a lot to this. And a lot of people have said a lot of things about it over the years, for sure, in terms of spirituality and so many things, but I feel that a lot of that helps people that are linear, but what about the people that are non-linear and then get stuck in these traumatic fields of energy and are unable to get out? And they keep reenacting this trauma in the form of maybe fear or anger responses, but it's not them. They're super sensitive and they're picking up on this. And the fact that there are human beings in that state should indicate the fault of the design of society. If society's designed so not everyone can have food, clothing, and shelter, then there's obviously a flaw in the design. But we don't see it that way. So we don't see people in those states of consciousness as a dis-ease in society. But I'm sure I've said that in so many different ways, and I don't need to keep saying it per se, but maybe I do. I don't know. I'm finding that my memory, if I don't really have memory so well, so I don't know what to do. I can only sort of speak to myself not from memory and try not to remember what I even said before, because I can't. And I've written some stuff down on a sheet of paper to do when I go home, and it feels like, will I even remember where that sheet of paper is? It's all so confusing. And that fear reaction I had the other night, I think I talked about it. I still feel some energy in my heart, and I don't know if it's all completely over, but that fear energy is definitely a lot of energy. I don't know if I have to call it fear, and if it is fear, I don't know if one needs to be afraid of the fear. It's a state of fear being induced, and if I just lay there and I don't act out of the fear, then the fear wasn't transformed into human muscular movements of acting it out. Meaning, if I'm afraid, maybe I start running. If I start running for no reason, I'm eventually going to be chased down and apprehended because I'm running for no reason. Unless I'm Forrest Gump, then I could say I just felt like running. But if I'm in the state of fear, then that probably will happen, where one would get captured. And I don't even know what I was saying. I forget. So not dividing oneself from the fear, but being that state of fear and allowing that fear to, I almost feel like it's creating more energy in the body in a way. Like, it's a lot of energy, and if one doesn't dissipate the energy by running or doing something fearful, then maybe one gains that energy. Like, for example, if I have a lot of fear and then I try to end my life, well, I end up in a lower energy state where I'm probably in the hospital and they're trying to revive me or detox me or something. And then that is a worse environment to try to get out of. So if I'm able to be with that fear as the state of fear, not separating myself as the one who's afraid of the fear, there's no separation, then it's energy. It can be energy undifferentiated by labeling it anything in particular. And I'm not sure how long I can go on like this, or if it will accumulate and I'll feel like I can't take it anymore. But we'll see, because this kind of feels like last year in the beginning of October when I started to feel that pain, and I was trying to be with the pain, and then it got too intense and I couldn't be with the pain, and I ended up taking antipsychotics. But now I'm taking the antipsychotics daily, And the pain's still there. It's not preventing it from happening. It's still happening kind of the same way. So if this passes, it could be good to try not to take the antipsychotics for a while and then save them for when it starts happening again. But maybe it lessens the intensity at this point in time. I don't know. I really don't know. And I'm just wondering if I can approach each moment as love, no matter what is going on inside, and not make the moment about myself. I find that I'm able to do that here. When I see people, I feel really smiley, and it doesn't feel fake. It doesn't feel like, oh, when I'm in my room by myself, I'm feeling this pain and a bit of fear and maybe anxiety. It's sort of when I'm with others, it just goes away, and I feel naturally smiley and vibrant. So there could be something to sharing at some point, because I might feel kind of isolated with this, but I'm not if I was to start sharing in ways that I feel comfortable with. And or maybe comfort is the wrong approach. Maybe I was also thinking this energy of not being comfortable could be keeping me really alert to the moment. Because I want to go back to being comfortable, but maybe there is no comfort. And that's something I've kind of learned, because I feel throughout my life, the way I was raised, I wasn't really comforted very much. And maybe that wasn't wrong, because even now, I don't know if getting help is the right approach, or if that strengthens the self. Or it could be that getting help helps to keep the self linear. Like having that dialogue helps me to keep me as myself, and that might be important for a period of time longer. I think at some point one needs to let go of it all and let things happen. But I think that's next year, but we'll see. I don't know, because sometimes I don't even think I'll survive until next year. But my job is to keep myself alive till I know what my job is. But I think part of it is learning not to propagate the fear and the anger. I think part of the thing is I feel like people know what's going on, because I have a sense of knowing what's going on, so then I tell them. So say I'm in a fearful state or angry, I'll act fearful or angry because I feel that person knows, whereas I could hold it in. I don't have to act fearful or angry. And I don't think that's a choice. I think that's a realization that people don't necessarily understand what's going on. And that's evident in how eventually someone like me gets called bipolar, because others just can't figure out what's going on with a person who is so inconsistent and up and down. But part of being inconsistent and up and down is that one is trying to say what's going on. One's trying to share what's going on with inside of oneself, which is, hey, I'm not this linear, consistent personality that I thought I was. I'm states of consciousness being played on this biological instrument like a flute. You change the note and something totally different happens. And so it's like, well, I'm an instrument of the universe, and being exposed to that way of being is very disorientating for a long period of time. And during that period of time, there aren't understanding people around saying, oh, you're trying to reorient yourself to a different way of operating. They're saying you're ill, you're angry, you're this, and they're reacting back in the same way. So they're mirroring that state. And then if one is in a high state, everyone around is mirroring that state too. So one realizes that one needs to be more responsible. And so again, it's not a choice, it's realizing how things work. And realizing that not everybody understands how things work. And even the one that feels they're coming to some understanding of how things work can't really understand how things work. And that's part of the understanding, is understanding that we can't understand how this works. And settling into that. And then trying to settle into how to be loved despite everything around one. Instead of mirroring that, mirroring the anger and the hate and the fear, and being that manifest as like a calling bird, one has to deflect it all somehow. And I think that's what I need to learn next. But how do you say to somebody, I don't know who I am, I don't understand life? You know, when we are acting confused in those early days and then we get labeled, we're basically trying to say, I don't know who I am, I don't know how the world works, I thought it worked this way, seems like it's working in all these other ways, I can't tell. And then, since we're confused, we get called ill. But it could be more scary that others aren't confused. They think they understand how the world works. So it could be seeing that others are confused, but they don't see that they're confused. They don't see that they're operating based on thought, which is confusion. So then what does one do with that? I think not speaking from thought is a start. Not speaking about oneself from memory. And then part of one feels like one doesn't want others to know this or not know anything, because then there's a period of chaos and yeah, I don't know. I'm just talking and the ocean looks magically wavical, and I'm gonna go back. And I think this video is a good indicator that my brain is working better after 3 days of loss of executive functioning and no energy, where I watched a lot of Netflix, the show Touch, and I watched a movie called Being There, which was an older one. I rented it on iTunes and it was interesting, and it was sort of a clue in how nothing's going on in that guy's head, but they're interpreting everything he says and sort of adding to it, and he doesn't even know. And it doesn't matter, he still is able to function in that world. And I think that's sort of how one needs to learn to operate. Allow people to think as they do, but don't respond based on that thinking. So, yeah. I don't even know how I saw that deer. I was right beside it and I just stopped, turned and looked, and there it was. Life meeting life, out of the peripheral, relaxed vision. I'm really tired today. I slept, but not that well. I tried to take a quarter of a trazodone, and I felt like I was sleeping, but not really, so I got up and took the other quarter. And then I woke up at 9 instead of like 12. So I didn't get as much sleep, and I definitely feel really tired. And sitting on a beach by myself and it doesn't really get much better than this, but I feel tired and my brain is pondering certain things, like what it would be like to be homeless and sitting here. I don't know. Most of these rocks are smiling. I thought today was going to be a tired day, and I laid on the beach for a while, and then I felt really thirsty, so I went to the store and I bought coconut water and kombucha and a bit of stuff to make a smoothie. And then I came back, got in my bathing suit to lay on the beach, and then I went in the water up to my legs, top of my legs, because it's really, really cold. But I was sort of trying to experience the experience of pain, because sometimes I have this pain, and I was feeling the pain in my legs, and then I was asking myself, where is the pain? And then it sort of felt more diffuse, and then eventually my legs went kind of numb and I couldn't feel it. But I was just sort of playing around with, like, where is this experience of pain? And then it sort of went away faster, I think. And now I'm on a little trail, and then I'm gonna go back and drink my kombucha and make a smoothie. And yeah, I feel like I have lots to talk about, but the thing is that I'm sort of going inwardly, and like things are coming up to mind, but I'm just being inward. I'm not writing anything down, and I'm not talking to myself on video because I'd have to sit there and then just say things sporadically, which I could do at some point, but it just feels like I'm processing a lot inwardly. And it's nice to know that if I'm tired, doesn't mean I'm going to be tired all day. And maybe my body needs something. Maybe I'm dehydrated. Maybe I need a coconut water. I did go back and take another Tyrosine because I felt like I could use a bit more of a boost. I can take up to 1,500 milligrams, and I only took 500, so that could have helped too. And the other strange thing is I sent a couple emails last week or the week before, and last week people were trying to reply to me and it wouldn't go through. So 2 different people, completely different, disconnected things. One said the email was sitting in their outbox, and the other person said it bounced back to them, so they were trying again. So why would the email bounce back? They wrote the right email address. I think it's pointing to something to do with how things are relative. There are multiple layers to reality. In a way, I don't exist. That sounds crazy, but I don't exist as a person. And it's sort of hard to make me manifest as a person. And so sometimes I sort of go into the unknown, the unmanifest, and literally technology has to wait for me to be sort of reconnected, because I exist in discontinuity. So I can go in and out of time, whereas others, so the emails have to wait till I'm sort of back in time to send out to me. And it's like a technological glitch to others, but to me, it's a clue of how this all works, and it's really messed up. So I think on this trip I'm coming to terms with some of the things that I've always known, but I put them aside because at the time they were too frightening to accept as true. You know, things about how time isn't linear. Reality is quantum. And there are parallel realities. There's no such thing as death. We jump realities. We're not made of matter. Fundamentally, we're awareness. Blah, blah. Like all the stuff that people talk about theoretically in spiritual circles or in metaphysical circles or whatever, they are true. And one can read them and sort of grasp them intellectually and be like, oh yeah, that's lovely. Things aren't linear. There's no causation, possibility, collapsing wave functions, or however they want to say it. But to live that experience is something completely disorienting, confusing, especially in the beginning, frightening, especially in the beginning. Like if you think the world is operating one way, and because you're thinking it's operating that way, and then all of a sudden it completely changes, and your brain can't keep up quick enough learning what it needs to learn in order to operate in that way. And it also is very resistant to changing the way it's operating, especially when others aren't changing the way they're operating. So it's really challenging, and it usually just drives one crazy. You know, there are a few people that get through it and they end up being teachers or gurus or something, but most of us end up nuts, and we don't know how to function in that way. And so we just pretty much don't understand, because we're trained not to learn how to understand through the education process. So, and I'm not saying I understand, I don't. What I'm saying is there's no one there that can understand anything. And yeah, and people don't want to know this. That's the thing that first scared me when I ever came in contact with that reality, when I was aware that I was aware of it. Because I was in it for a while, but I wasn't really aware that I was in this dimension of mind where anything's possible. And like a non-physical world. And yeah, when I became aware that I was aware of it, I then became aware that others weren't aware of it, and that they didn't want to be aware of it, because it would drive one nuts. And then from that moment on, I started to go nuts. Because I think there's a problem with trying to tell people about it versus living it out quietly. think this what might be happening to the homeless people too, is that they're living in mind. So like the reality of mind that's non-linear, non-logical, kind of magical. So their bodies are kind of flopping around in the Newtonian world. It's too windy. So we can get to that world of mind physically, but we do need to create a structure of society that is congruent with that mind operating through our brains. Right now, thought and a separate self is operating through our brains, and the structure of how we live reflects that. So the sign of us getting closer would be there would be no homeless people, there would be no rape, there would be no people taking power over others, because we'd understand that it's all one mind. But we think we're physically separate, but we're much more than our physical appearance. We're entangled with each other. So I think those beings are there as a symptom of a greater disease of society. And all the healing and helping professions, we'd be living joyously and magically. We wouldn't be needing to help each other as professionals versus the people who didn't do well in school, who need the professionals. So there's a real incongruence with how things are. And, you know, am I here to be in a physical body to play a role of mental patient, or am I here to say things how they are? There's people that are lucky enough to be somewhat successful enough to make themselves comfortable. Then at some point they realize it's meaningless, so they search out spirituality or something. But the people who are mentally ill, supposedly, and homeless, they've gone into that reality. The spirituality is not a concept, it's not information, it's not words, it's an actual reality. And one needs to know how to operate in that way. And one can be successful and then learn the spiritual principles and then learn to operate in that way somewhat. But some people are thrust into it, and we're not taught those things. Or we're not taught how to learn fast enough to keep up with it. And so we falter. I think going inwardly is something I'm learning right now, and not perpetuating that fearful energy that comes over me outwards. Just taking it on, being crucified by it, and it's okay. Not passing it on to others. We'll see if I can do that. And another thing is that documentary on Osho on Netflix. I think it's rather remarkable what they were able to create in a short period of time. They turned a plot of nothing land into, you know, housing and airport and a lake. There was nothing there. And they were able to do all that by working together from the ground up. And I think that scared the powers that be, how that love energy really can make people cooperate. And they, you know, the stuff they did is no different than governments do, or nations. Like, I'm being medicated, and it's said for my own good. Yeah, maybe they put people on antipsychotics and they gave them homes. That's what they're trying to do now, is they have housing first and they give someone homes if they'll take their medication. So those people were ahead of their time, and they housed a lot of homeless people. They did kick some out eventually, but I think it was pretty successful what they did for people. And it also reminds me of the Swarm, how that guru was sort of the queen bee, and as soon as he was gone, they all just disbanded. Because his energy was a morphogenetic field that kept them all together. He didn't even do anything, he sat in a room. But all the love they had that was sort of directed towards him was able to create something. Just like, say Christianity, their love of God and Jesus creates all of their structures and what they do. So, it was just a microcosm of macrocosms of society, and it provided a mirror to see that, but it was made into this horrible thing, and it looks like they did do some bad stuff, but everyone does bad stuff, so who knows? I'm not saying I don't really know enough to know, but I'm sure there's other sides to the story, and what they built was impressive.